Welcome to another session of Ecosystem Engage, the Not So Daily Show. This is a really fascinating session across pretty much all the global time zones. I'm joined by Vinod Muthukrishnan, who's the Chief Growth Officer for Cisco's contact center business, based out of the Bay Area. We've got Rajiv Menon, who runs Cisco Investments for Asia Pacific. He's the managing director for Cisco Investments, based out of Singapore. And we've got Audrey William, our principal advisor, who drives our UC and contact center practice, based out of Sydney. So welcome everyone. You guys doing well?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Yes, we are. Great to be here, Amit.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And look, we're going to have a fascinating conversation around all things contact centers. But before we get into that, just a few things. One of the biggest learning for us in these times has been that this is obviously we all know it's unprecedented times, but we also know that while we talk about the economic crisis is really the fallout of a humanitarian crisis, right? And what that means is the biggest impact is on people, and people being, of course, ourselves, our families, our teams, customers, partners, everyone. So the first thing I wanted to just check in with you guys is how are you both doing, Vinod and Rajiv, and how are you looking after yourselves? Maybe I'll go with you, Vinod. I hear you're a very keen sailor. So you take out sailboats in the Bay Area. That's the best way to leverage the lifestyle. You can live in San Francisco, but outside of that, you also play cricket. But it'd be great to understand how you're looking after yourself.
For 9 years, it paid my bills, so it was not a hobby. And now I'm in a point where I'm sailing as a hobby, so it's definitely more enjoyable now. As I said, for the last 3 months, no sailing, definitely no cricket. Everything's been stalled. But what I've started, interestingly enough, is my cricket team and we never did this before, but we now have a virtual sort of an evening exercise which starts soon after this, wherein we all get together, and even folks who've never exercised before historically are exercising. And then we thankfully live in California, which is nice. So the girls go cycling, and running after them keeps me going. So that much of sunlight is needed to keep you going.
Well, I mean, clearly you're looking well, Vinod, and I'm really pleased to see you looking well. And you've got a haircut, unlike some of us, and so that's great. And Rajiv, it must be midday for you, because you're the only other person I know who wakes up at 3:30 and starts work or starts his day is Mark Wahlberg. I don't personally know him, but I know you. So tell us about how you're looking after yourself.
I love the comparison to Mark Wahlberg. Thanks, and I appreciate you kicking off the interview with that. Yeah, no, I do wake up early. I enjoy it. There's a bit of a story behind it. I began to do that more than a year ago. But yeah, I just kind of like Vinod. I have been taking the kids out cycling, and I run alongside them. I cycle alongside them. I push scooter alongside them. All that stuff. And for slightly more intense exercises, I climb up and down the fire stairwell of the building. But it's been good. It's I have to admit, I'm kind of getting used to this current lifestyle of being able to get some decent exposure to the sun and exercise, but then being productive at home, cutting out travel time and all the rest of it. But it's been good, actually, and looking forward to Singapore opening up later this week more fully.
So as investors do, Rajiv, I understand you do like to spend some time on the polo grounds. So you're probably going to hit the polo grounds as soon as it opens up.
I do enjoy polo. I'm lucky enough to have learned to play it. I don't know if I'll hit it as soon as it opens up, to be honest. My wife and I are thinking through how soon we go back to all types of activities, even if they're available. we might wait a couple of weeks and sort of ease ourselves in. But yes, in time, I hope to get back to the polo grounds.
Look, very sensible. In the meanwhile, we'll, if we don't get to see you live on the polo ground, we'll just make do with the pictures. But look, the other thing I wanted to chat about was, before we get into contact centers, and we'll get there, Audrey, we will very soon.
No, please.
Cisco literally are the originators of remote working, right? I mean, you guys started WebEx, and WebEx has for very long been the dominant player in the market. So remote working is not new to you guys. The way your office, your smart buildings that you set up at Cisco globally were always focused on remote working and enabling people to have flexi work and so on. So there must have been lots and lots of learnings that you've had along the way. But how has the process been now that you've been all forced to have to work remotely and engage remotely with your teams? How have you guys worked through that, and how have you kept your teams, motivated through these times?
Vinod, do you want to take that?
Oh, in our case, so two things, right? When you say my team, for me, there's the Cloud Cherry team that came on board, and then there's the new Cisco team that I run. So with the Cloud Cherry team, we've actually done company-wide, like team-wide all hands every alternate Monday. We used to do that monthly earlier. Now it's every other week. With my own team, of course, in the US, the cadence of communication is very heavy, and every Friday we have a happy hour, which I think will outlast COVID. So that's an idea we've discovered is worth continuing. But I think in general, what's helped at Cisco in general, the level of engagement from leadership across has just been pretty on point. So very early recognition happened that suddenly people have gone back home and you don't know what people are dealing with, the circumstances they're in. Maybe they miss, the environment an office gives. So as a company, I think engagement has been pretty active. I love that. As a team, we've just tried to communicate as often as we can. And in general, I think I've stepped up the frequency of one-on-ones, because sometimes you just need to be more in touch with people. The last thing I'll tell you is that I think now there's a belated recognition that, earlier when you had a work from home scenario, like the odd day, everything had to be quiet, everything had to be perfect, right? But now there's this recognition that, look, families around you, somebody running around, there'll be this shriek that will go off in the background, and that's not newsworthy anymore. So that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, Amit, on my side, obviously as a Cisco colleague, I would echo what Vinod said with Chuck and the ELT having started these weekly check-ins, which, by the way, in and of itself to me has been inspiring and amazing, that a company of 70, 80,000 people coming together every week. And I think those check-ins have been pretty interesting. I don't know, Vinod, if you would agree, but it feels to me like they've become such an attraction for employees, because they've really become a go-to thing. I consider like these check-ins have sort of three topics that they try to cover every week. One have been our panel of corporate doctors who come on and addressing employee questions around mental health issues that you're dealing with at home with parents, with kids, etc., all kinds of things, or overworking, which all of us have experienced in these last few weeks. So that's one topic. The other is, really business questions around, hey, are you going to do, what happens to my job? How's the company thinking about dealing with this crisis? Taking those questions head on. And then the third aspect has been just inviting guests, I would say well-known guests from a variety of fields, and hearing them speak on the topic. So they've really become popular go-tos every week. And in the recent couple of weeks, the topic shifted to what's going on in the US and now has become a global topic around discrimination and minorities. And so, I mean, frankly, that's been inspiring. I've benefited from that as an employee. Our teams have benefited. And outside of that, kind of like Vinod, I almost feel we become tighter within my team in some ways. I thought we used to meet and talk very often, but in these times, that has gone up like 3x. Don't get me wrong, we all look forward to the time we can do this in person as well. But I have to say, I haven't felt disconnected, and I don't think the teams have. So yeah, it's been good. And to your point, Amit, working remotely I don't think was a new thing for most Cisco employees with the tools and the technology and the culture we have. But the entire world working from home was a bit of a new thing. But again, that has kind of been normalized. So we're doing okay, in short.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that's great, and obviously, you guys have been gurus of remote working. You've got most of the world hooked onto it last year or so, but I think in general, I think as people, I think we're quite resilient, and we just we adapt to things, right? And I think most of us have found it easy. But yes, I think equally we're all looking forward to getting back to the offices and catching up with our colleagues. I think that's the biggest thing. So,
and I think just one thing, if I can add there, I think one thing that's really changed all of this based on what Vinod said and Rajiv is video conferencing usage. It's a norm now. It's a must-have. It's almost like non-negotiable. So you can just imagine it's really changed the paradigm of how we communicate and collaborate. So yeah, fascinating times.
Yeah, absolutely. We have our ongoing COVID research because we've got a real-time research platform, right? So we continue to gather data from the market ongoing. And I think our latest research, obviously, no surprises there, shows video conferencing by far the biggest investment by companies in the last couple of months. I think followed by the second priority, I think, Audrey, was cybersecurity, right? So both very, very key areas of business for Cisco. And I'm sure you're helping your customers through that. So on that topic, helping your customers, Rajiv, I thought let me ease in with a simple question for you. What was your biggest driver to bring Cloud Cherry into the broader Cisco portfolio?
So Cloud Cherry was a portfolio company before we acquired them in 2019. And so we knew the company well, we knew the team well. And simultaneously, as we were spending time with our contact center BU at the time, call it through 2018, early 2019, we had concluded that as we continue to build organically on our contact center foundation, we did want to complement those efforts through some inorganic moves, one of them being in the voice of the customer journey analytics space, right, sitting on our foundation. And here was Cloud Cherry, arguably with a world-class management team, although we can debate that later offline. And on a serious note, right, really a world-class platform. And again, we had the opportunity to observe the team and the company grow over a couple of years. And so yeah, the answer was quite straightforward to us, that we need to bring them even closer and make them part of the Cisco family. So that was really it. Maybe Vinod can add to that, but that was the perspective from our side.
Yeah, I mean, my addition is that, I always joke that nobody ever calls or reaches out to the contact center for the first time to talk about the contact center, right? It's always that outreach is driven by something else that happened somewhere else in the journey. And the best sort of customer service resolution is an issue that never was created, which means the best answer you can give on a call is to a call that never happened. So the worlds of customer experience and customer service, which sat apart for the longest time, are converging, because the end business objective is how do you give better experiences to your customers, right? And drive profitability by retention and loyalty. So as that happened and we saw where do companies invest maximum in customer experiences, typically in the contact center. So it was but natural that as we looked at where does this company go, a contact center ecosystem seemed like the right place where customer experience was converging. And when obviously the right time came, you obviously build a company always for posterity, but I think as a founder, you also need to know when is the right time to be part of a larger organization, to accelerate how fast you can get to customers, how fast you can develop product, and just ride on top of a larger platform, which is what the contact center business gives us. So, and in general, I think I've dealt with lots of Cisco folks over the past 3 years, pre-acquisition, Rajiv being foremost amongst them as he sat on my board. And in general, I was just, and it's quite amplified by what I'm seeing now inside Cisco is I genuinely felt, and I'm not saying this because you're recording this, that this was some pretty good culture. And when we had a competitive situation, we knew one thing with Cisco for sure, that this is an environment we'd feel comfortable in. And I was wrong in sense of I underestimated how good the culture is. In light of recent events, if I went back and if I knew all of this, I would not even think twice. So definitely culture was a huge part of us coming together.
That's always good to hear. I mean, it seems like you've blended in seamlessly into that culture. I guess the long courtship before you got in there helped as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and in a different environment, right? The environment was where Cisco invested in us. Rajiv was on our board for a long time. He had, in fact, made changes which he told us would be better for us. I remember the time when he said, "No, I don't think I should be on your board. Somebody else should be." And I'm like, "Why are you leaving?" And he's like, "No, this is better for you." And even that, in hindsight, turned out to be the right decision that he took unilaterally. So I think the point was, as we were building the company and having first principles discussions on where customer experience should go, having Cisco folks around the table helped because they know us better than just our numbers, right? That was definitely very helpful.
Yeah. And look, as an analyst, I've spoken to Rajiv a few times, and over the years, and Rajiv has been, it's no surprise that it transpired the way it did, because I think Rajiv's spoken very highly of the Cloud Cherry business, and he was excited like a little kid when the acquisition happened, I think. So I think it's working out really well, and it's working out well for the market as well. So on that, I think what it brings is a really, really interesting extension to what Cisco provided as a core contact center offering, right? So Audrey, we've had a few conversations, and you've brought up many times that a contact center is a brand, is an extension of a brand, right? So companies that treat it as an extension of a brand can really focus on customer experience as a top priority.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've always felt, and we chatted about it last week as well, do we still see a disconnect between sales and marketing and the contact center folks? Is there actually a disconnect at that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really good point, Amit. And I think if you look at sales and marketing teams, the challenge is a lot of them have their own KPIs. They're running with their own KPIs on what customer experience is, how to delight a customer, how to drive a sale. And many a times they will push out a promotion and that will get to a customer. But that same customer that, let's say, calls the contact center, has a problem with an issue, but maybe wants to make a booking and says, "Hey, I received this, really keen on it. Your marketing team sent this." The agent will sometimes not even know that has happened. In fact, based on ecosystems research, this is fascinating, right? We asked CX leaders across the world, what are the two main challenges in driving consistent CX? And the two outcomes were, the different departments have different KPIs and we're all not aligned. And the other one that came out strongly is just the channels being used across marketing, sales, and then the contact center, and then having that data that is collected from that is then not integrated. So I think, this, whilst it's a challenge, it represents a huge opportunity in the industry. And I believe that it's just important to bring those silos closer together. The more you can bring that together, the more there is a uniform answer as well you can give to the customer. So yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of companies are working through that. And I'm sure, Vinod, this is something you live and breathe. You've probably got something to share as well here.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, because let's say sales is incentivized to close your deal in the fastest possible time. You're not incentivizing the sales rep to see if Audrey is happy, for example, right? My job is to sell and get out of here because I need to close my next sale. So I generally don't care about service issues. Let's assume the KPI is like sell more, right? But if I had a KPI called retention, wherein 12 months down the line, is Audrey still buying from us? Is her NPS high? I'd think about the sale very differently, right? But even within the contact center, which is the same team, sometimes the metrics are not aligned. So you may say, like, profitability is calculated with call handling time, which means shorter the call,
Yes.
more profitable it is. Imagine you're calling up, stuck in a remote place because your, let's say, credit card is not working, right? You're in an alien country, and I'm trying to get you off the call as soon as possible. That's counter to what the customer wants. Customer actually wants to know that you've got them, and sometimes it takes longer. I actually experienced this at the Cisco contact center during open enrollment when I was trying to find out what's the plan and I didn't know what was happening. And then I was on the call with that lady for 20 minutes and I told her, look, I'm really sorry. I'm sure I'm taking too much. She said, listen, take as much time as you want, right?
Yeah.
Like, we need to get your insurance policy, right? Whatever insurance plan, right? So take your time. Let's talk through this. And this was a case of a KPI of profitability running counter to experience. I'm an employee, good EX also results in good CX. So metrics are totally misaligned, not just between different teams. Even inside the customer service team, sometimes the metrics don't yield what the customer
Absolutely.
wants.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, Vinod, this is something I talk about, and I'm sure we've spoken about this as well in the past, is that average handle time metric must probably be relooked at. Because, you can't just penalize that agent now and say, hey, you've spent 45 minutes with the customer when that customer is actually going to spend $500,000 with you for a loan because the customer has all the questions, the customer wants to ask everything about variable rates, fixed rates, and they're going to make a big investment. But the moment they hit that 45-minute or 1 hour mark, their rating might go down. The contact center leader will say, you're not supposed to take that long. And so I think this is where the whole KPIs that are being used, it will really need to be relooked at and probably also augmented with machine learning and AI, because I believe that when that conversation is then going on with that agent, if that call took over 45 minutes, but the agent was happy, the customer was happy, the customer was delighted, the customer was like, hey, you know what, I'm going to probably call you back tomorrow, then that's a winner. And this is where I think machine learning and AI will really change the way KPIs are looked at.
No, completely agree. My last addition to that one line is, we also need to see what happens to take that example further. Did Audrey continue to buy with us, buy more, buy less? We need to look at the end outcome, the impact of that interaction. And the real quantification can only come with, did that leave the customer in a place wherein they continue to do more business with you, right? And if you incentivize on metrics that have probably no correlation to customer experience or your propensity to come back and do business with the brand, then it's probably the wrong metric, even though it may make money in the shorter time. So anyway, I think we're completely aligned. So I don't want to belabor the point.
It's fascinating you brought up employee experience, and we know all our research shows that employee experience is one of the biggest contributors to good customer experience, right? And while most of us don't look forward to calling our contact centers, whether it's a bank or utilities company or a telco, the reality is, the more we think about it, if you don't arm them properly, and if you don't, you don't give the right information to the agents, and if you don't make their lives easier, I mean, could most of us sit through an entire day just listening to people's problems? Yes, probably if you're a psychiatrist and you were getting, you're getting paid big bucks. But these guys live, in different conditions, different parts of the world, and they have to sit through and listen to. Most of the calls are not about people saying, "Hey, you're doing a great job." Most calls are with customers who are agitated, who are basically upset, and they have to deal with that. I think that's a great skill for people to have. So
Absolutely.
if you can actually help make their lives easier, you're already taking care of the way your brand's going to be reflected to your customers. Right?
No, absolutely. I think you can't drive great customer experience if you don't have happy agents. And that's why I think there's so much of emphasis now. We talk so much about technology when we talk about CX and contact centers, but really the crux of it are the agents, and just making them feel empowered, and like not, I think also stress levels are high. To your point, Amit, it's really high. It's always almost not a happy call, and so I think understanding and understanding how they are, making their work environment good, uh, having that empathy, I think it's absolutely critical. And it's been shown during this COVID period to a lot of contact centers I've spoken to about how they felt closer to their agents.
Yeah. So in that respect, I guess, are you seeing, Audrey, more and more contact centers moving away from being reactive to actually being more proactive and taking this approach to drive greater CX?
Yeah, this is a really good area, because I think more brands have to do it. And to Rajiv's point, when he spoke about Cloud Cherry, this whole area around customer journey analytics, understanding the customer journey, that is absolutely critical. And if you want to get to the point where you can be proactive, then you really have to understand, to what Vinod mentioned as well. After you've purchased that product, how happy are you as a customer? But prior to that, if there are any problems that have happened early in the journey of the customer, how do you arrest that problem? And a great example is, if you check into a hotel, there's this global startup. I love the application they've created, whereby through an emoji, whether you're happy or sad, you just say, really frustrated, you hit the button saying the whole check-in experience was bad. It triggers off front desk to address it, and also the contact center. Now, the brilliant part about that is, the GM can then come to the room and say, hey, I heard about this. Here's a bottle of wine, but we're giving you, dinner at the hotel, every day of this week. But then also someone else will say, hey, we realize that you're unhappy with this service. Let us take care of it. Now, the beauty about that is, the moment this customer checks out of the hotel, and the front desk says, how was your stay? The customer is not going to say, that was bad. The customer will say, I had all these issues. You guys resolved it. I was really impressed by what the general manager did, for example. So all of a sudden, you've prevented a few things from happening. One is, that customer could have gone to TripAdvisor and to some forums to just write bad things about your brand. You've prevented that from happening. The second thing that's happened is, because of that proactive approach now, you've delighted the customer. The customer is likely going to buy from you again. The customer is likely going to be a customer after this experience. So I think, yeah, more and more brands are starting to invest in that, but it requires a lot of deep analytics, understanding the customer journey, taking feedback at every point of the customer's journey is going to be absolutely critical.
And maybe, Amit, if I can jump in, just taking the example Audrey gave, and I think I know the company she's talking about, and extra, sort of transposing that to what I learned about Cloud Cherry a couple of years before we acquired the company. I mean, this was Vinod educating Rajiv, and I love that. I've never forgotten that example. Is, going back to what you were saying, customers typically have called in because they have an issue. And imagine that, and this was the company vision, right, that they can deliver on. And this is also the reactive and proactive piece. So imagine I call into a contact center, I'm already feeling either somewhat upset or very upset about an issue. And not only does the agent know who's calling, the agent, he or she knows likely what I'm calling about.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately says, Mr. Menon, looks like you had an issue with this. And I can speak for myself. Immediately, I'll be calmer. I'll be like, wow, these guys know what they're doing. They're tracking. And then he or she begins to speak to that issue. And then the proactive piece can build on that, right? Like I don't even call the contact center. I was searching for a product online. I put it in the cart. I don't complete the purchase. And here comes the call saying, Mr. Menon, looks like you were searching for this and this size shoe, but you didn't quite go through it. Did you not find the model you wanted? And things like that. So I agree with what you said, Audrey, and that's how I think also a contact center experience can change, or customer experience can change, in which the contact center can play their role.
The one,
By the way, sorry, I just want to acknowledge the very frequent video bombing going on in my views, something Vinod was talking about earlier. So I want to just acknowledge the video bombing going on every few minutes. I admire.
that's the nature of work, and I think that's really what we need to normalize. That look,
Yeah, that's right.
Our home lives are not so alien from what we do that we need to have this physical barrier between the two. And I think it's
That's
awesome
right.
that you have a young
Very
participant that is
on cue.
I love this. If my daughters knew, they'd both be here. But anyway, so I want to add just one thing around being proactive. See, a lot of focus is on issue resolution, right? So Mr. Menon's calling because he didn't find something. But what about systemic issues? One of the things with getting customer experience data with service is to also decipher that it looks like many people like Mr. Menon, when they try to do this at this pace in our website, tend to get stuck, right? And giving an input that, hey, why don't you solve the root of the problem? Because once he calls, I can be empathetic. That's fine. That's amazing, right? But what if you could preempt some of those calls by eliminating that friction point somewhere else in the customer journey? Because a lot of these calls are coming here or chats. When I say call, for me, really, it's any channel, right? Yeah. And then a significant part of these people, because it's already happened, let's say churn. So if we were to be able to tell you the dollar benefit of preventing that call from Mr. Menon coming, that is the true value of CX, right? You're going and making systemic changes to your service, right, across the entire journey, and not waiting for that call to come, because then you're always playing a bit of catch up. And that's really where CX and customer service coming together for me was very attractive, and goes back to the question why we are part of Cisco.
And to Rajiv's point, right? If I'm a really angry customer, but when that call comes in through machine learning, through AI, through analytics, that agent already almost knows why that customer is calling. You know, that is really, it will really calm the customer down, because the customer will go like, you know, I'm frustrated, I've had these problems, but it gives time now for the agent to proactively suggest some solutions to it before the customer can even continue with the story. So you're impressing the customer that you knew about the problem.
Interestingly enough, just for you to know, today, this day, 3 hours ago, I spent 45 minutes on call with a contact center here. It was pushed between 3 teams. They kept telling me, oh, this is the other team. And then they said, we've given them all the context, just go there, they'll solve it for you. Went to the other team, again went into the queue, went through the IVR, went to the person who didn't have context, then who sent me to a third one at the 45th, for something urgent, by the way. This is super urgent. 45th minute, I hung up and said, you know what, this problem is probably not worth solving. And what it was very urgent and fairly sensitive a thing that had to be solved, but I gave up. This is today's customer experience. So we have a ways to go.
I have to ask, in the end, did you say, hey, I called about a shoe, but I'm going to sell you a contact center?
I wish, I could tell them, but they didn't have chat, because I would not have wanted to wait 45 minutes on call. They didn't have a chat on their mobile app or their website. It's a uber large bank, by the way, not a small bank. No chat, no ability for me I couldn't find an email ID to send. There's only phone, and I got hopped between 3. It is probably the worst customer experience in a contact center I've had in my life. And that happened today. So, I know our mission is still valid because
oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the worst thing also, when you get transferred from one department to another, having to repeat yourself is still a common problem. The data is not aligned.
So that, and as Chief Growth Officer, that sounds like a great commercial strategy. Just get everyone in your teams to just call contact centers, and then figure out all the challenges, and then go back and sell to them. I love that. But look, what I'm hearing from both of you, and from Rajiv and Rajiv and I have shared our views as consumers with contact centers, but from both of you, who deal with this sector day in, day out, listening to customers consistently, beyond surveys and feedback platforms, and then actioning it, seems to be key. I think it's really, how do you do it consistently to be able to preempt and action? Would that be correct, Audrey?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's why that whole understanding the customer's journey is so important before the problem occurs, before they call the call center, but also after they've made that purchase with you. Let's say they've bought that loan from you, and you're a bank, you're a happy bank, but the customer will keep calling. How do you then delight them after that purchase? I think that's when the customer will start spreading the great word about your brand and saying, you know what, it's not only the product, but it's the service that I'm getting from this company that is absolutely brilliant.
And I'll add an example. We always say, listen, at home in our personal lives, we've been conditioned to listen to signals not verbally spoken, right? We're supposed to look at body language, we're supposed to look at sentiment, we're supposed to extrapolate what's said to a different context. That's a basic life skill. But in a professional customer experience organization, we don't do that, right? So when you talk about listening to customers, it's not just feedback. Feedback, by the way, even Gartner says it's like direct, indirect, and inferred, right? There's all sorts of feedback. There's stuff people tell you. There's stuff people experience. There's stuff people don't tell you, don't experience, but give you by means of breadcrumbs, which is either their online behavior, purchase history, even movement within a store, right? Roving
Yep.
street. Two people who spend 30 minutes in a store are not the same customer. They may have had completely different sort of in-store journeys. So the ability to listen not just directly, but indirectly and infer from transactions, all of that comes into the bucket of VOC, voice of the customer. And hence you mentioned something that I like, which is like beyond surveys, right? It's not just what you explicitly ask, it's also what you discern by observation.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, earlier we were talking about the metrics, the CX metrics for agents and the broader teams. What would be really good to understand is the role of technology, and how do you use AI to actually make all this happen, right? It's I mean that it would be really interesting to understand what the role of AI would be now and in the future.
Yep, a really good example is the metrics we talked about just now, like average handling time. So I think when you can apply that and see how the agent has performed, but then also understand how the customer felt, the emotion of the customer, the sentiment analysis. I also think another area where this can be explored greatly is, whilst you still have NPS ratings, which, we all know are very big when measuring, the likelihood of, let's say, a product being recommended to a family or a friend after a call. Sometimes a lot of that, or during a survey, a lot of that is also going to be really powerful if you can apply sentiment to that, right? If a lot of that can be used alongside sentiment analysis. So how did the customer really feel? So it tells you that they didn't just tick a box and say, yes, I was happy, or yes, I'm going to buy that product, because they're two very different things. But if that customer was really super happy, super impressed, it really shows that it was genuine and they didn't just tick a box to make that survey happen. So I truly believe that AI and machine learning, they're really going to change this whole landscape of just looking at the KPIs in isolation.
Yeah, I mean, I would basically say that, look, AI basically in a contact center, customer care environment operates in three places. One is before anyone comes to the contact center. Second is obviously in contact center, and third is post. And for long it's been told that AI will replace the human. It won't. It'll actually augment the human. That's our stated philosophy. So before you come to the contact center, the point is how can we use conversational IVR, intent detection, all of that to maybe serve you right up front, or use that as a leading indicator to make sure you speak to the right agent. Like if two of us are agents over a period of time, it's fairly easy to observe that we are different kinds of agents, right? Somebody does better at shorter conversations, somebody has more empathy, likes long-winded ones, somebody's good with payments, somebody's better with refunds. So as you start segmenting your agents with skills, and skills are not just hard skills, it's soft skills, right?
Yeah.
Better agent routing, matching, pairing is hugely impactful in terms of customer experience. Also in call, transcription, sentiment, like Audrey mentioned, live sentiment analytics, understanding what's happening in call, being able to give live answers in call. So if you're calling me about something, we've always seen the agent starts to slow down their words per minute. That's because they are reading some FAQ database, and then they're like, yes, I know what you're saying. Now, if basis what's happening in the call, you get a live answer stream that this is likely what they're looking for. It is so much easier because the greatest superpower an agent has actually is empathy and attention, right?
Yes.
And technology has to enable you to do that. And the last really is post call, which is agents spend a lot of time post call. One of the big causes I heard somewhere, I forgot where the data came from, is I tell you on the call, yeah, I will get back to you by tomorrow. And the moment it gets done, I have to wrap up my call, I go to my next call. Guess what? I forget. Whereas a post-call wrap-up, which is action items, key highlights, transcription, follow-on, reminders, if all of that is automated, then you can imagine how much more powerful that agent becomes. So AI
Yeah.
is hugely impactful in the contact center.
And I think you mentioned a really good point there, Vinod, and that is this whole agent assist piece is going to be big because you are now empowering the agent to make smart decisions through a virtual bot or just through information coming in real time while that call is going on. And that's really impressive. But the other thing is also, to your point around transcription, agents have a lot of work that they have to do also. Report writing is part of their jobs every day. Now, and the feedback that I'm getting is through a lot of these automation technologies and transcribing, a lot of time is saved. They don't have to use that time to now write down, what's happened or send some report to their supervisor. It's all done for them. So I think this whole agent assist piece is going to be absolutely big. And I'm getting a lot of feedback from contact centers saying that they are looking to invest in this. This is going to be really big.
Yeah. And look, that's fascinating because I love what you said earlier. You talked about empathy and augmenting AI with the human element, and I think that is the power of it. Right? If you can empower the agents and they bring the human touch, and they're able to, you're arming them so that they're in a better frame of mind and they're better prepared. It will result in them providing a much better experience and resolving issues because that's what they do. Right? That's what contact center agents do. They do actually resolve issues for us. Eventually, sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's easier, but in general, the intent is to make us, make us happy, right? It's just that most of us come in a very angry frame of mind when we get to by the time we get to the contact center. So I think that's wonderful. I'm conscious of time, and we have to do a wrap. But I actually have a question for Rajiv because there are lots of innovative companies like CloudCherry out there, Rajiv, who can benefit tremendously by either partnering or becoming a part of a larger global leader in certain sectors. What's maybe a message from you in terms of what should founders of these companies be looking for, and what are some of the things that you as strategic investors look for in some of these companies? What are the traits you look for?
So, it sounds like a more general question around investing, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So, I'll say a few things. It can be a big topic, but what we look for. So, firstly, we invest both strategically and thematically around each of our Cisco business units or domains, right? So there's 8 or 9 Cisco domains that make up the $50-odd billion of revenue that Cisco is. And that starts from our roots in the infrastructure layer all the way up to the app layer. So invest both strategically as well as thematically. And generally what we look for companies is, obviously good founding teams, committed founding teams, good vision, and importantly, an alignment of both that vision and culture that Vinod referenced earlier with our culture and what we look for. So that's kind of like the high level answer. The answer can be very detailed, based on each specific area, but I would say that's the high level answer. And I don't know, Vinod, if you would add anything there from an portfolio investment when you were a portfolio company of ours before the acquisition, and of course now we work with you on investing in companies. So it's kind of like a full circle, right? So you can speak to it from that standpoint as well. And indeed, we know that some of us are working actively on some opportunities, even as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree. I think it takes it takes a lot to bring two companies together, and for a company like Cisco, which has this stellar like 200 plus sort of acquisition record, the science and the art has been kind of brought together. So I've viewed it that, but I generally believe it's a little bit of both. And Rajiv rightly captured just the essential elements. And from a portfolio company perspective, you'll realize that when you go back to other founders and you talk about the experience, you speak about the onboarding experience significantly. Cisco actually invests very significantly in just the onboarding experience, right? So in our case, we had a history with the company thanks to the investment, but if you didn't, your real measure is how you are brought on board, right? From a process perspective, from a diligence perspective, and that process just gold plated. It's pretty amazing. So definitely, as I said, if there was an NPS to give for acquisition, I'd probably give it a 9 or a 10.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure that put a smile on Rajiv's face.
Well, it did, and I have to say I'm lucky to be a part of the team. I wasn't responsible for creating that high NPS. I'm a beneficiary of it as much as the companies are. And also, Amit, I know you asked a question about investment, and we sort of transition to acquisitions as well. But we look for, as I said, while investing, still great teams, still great cultures, other than great vision. And in some instances, they turn out to be acquisitions as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives it the color.
Well, and look, good luck ahead. It really seems like you've you found the right sort of formula in terms of investments and then acquisitions, and being able to onboard these companies and blend them into your culture seamlessly. So I think that's exceptional. Rajiv, as I've discussed with you previously, I think we'll probably run a separate session with you in the area of technology investments, because I think that would be very, very helpful. Conscious of time, I just want to say thank you again. We really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our viewers are going to enjoy it tremendously. And I wish you both stay well, stay safe, and for your teams as well, and your families as well.
Thanks, Amit.
Likewise.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
so much for having us.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.